Welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology on a Sunday. I want to go over the topic of DMT beings and what are these beings that people are experiencing whenever they use DMT. If you're not familiar, DMT is a psychedelic drug that some people consume, and whenever they do so, they testify to these beings that they encounter, and they will swear up and down, many of them will say, through this experience, they feel that they entered into a realm that was more real than reality itself, more real than the experiences that you and I currently have. And so they feel that whatever they're experiencing, it's real. Perhaps they're being somehow in communication with other beings out there in the universe, and they'll come away with all kinds of interesting stories. I first heard of this. I can't say I first heard of it with Joe Rogan, but I suppose it was really pronounced with Joe Rogan and a few shows that I heard him conduct, and a few interviews that he had. And he's experienced DMT before, it seems, and has spoken of these beings, and other individuals like Terrence McKenna, also a really famous individual on this topic, has spoken about it at length. And they speak of these entities that they encounter. Some of them are elf-like machine beings. A lot of people who take DMT say that they see these things. Some people wonder, well, is it just because Terrence McKenna popularized this? Is that why they're saying these things? Is it all just purely mental, or are they actually encountering something that is real? They're actually in communication with some beings out there in the universe, and we just can't really explain it. That's what I want to talk about today from a theologian's perspective. So I'm a Catholic. I have not taken DMT, and I'm not going to take it, because when I read sacred scripture, it tells us to be sober and keep our minds sober. So as a Christian, I just don't see one having any business of taking these things. But what I want to do is maybe explore what exactly are these beings for those who say that this is real, and they say this experience is authentic, it's more real than this reality. Well, if that's true, then okay, what might these beings be? That's what I want to explore today. Now, I can't authenticate whether this is real or not. Even if one has an experience and they feel that this is real, well, that's just a subjective experience. There's all kinds of people out there that feel things are real, and in fact they are hallucinations and stuff like that. So just because you feel it's real and you feel it's more real than this reality doesn't necessarily make it so. So I can't weigh in on that unless we have scientific data to really verify whether people are actually having these encounters, or if it's just purely something psychological. I can't weigh in there. But what I can say is, well, let's assume that they're real for a moment. What exactly might these beings be if they are real? So what I'll do is I'm going to go over a video here where an individual explores various beings that people often encounter during these DMT trips, and they describe firsthand accounts of what they witness, what these beings are, what these entities are. I'm going to go through some of the common ones, and then I'm going to pull out some scriptures and kind of compare them to, okay, well, what might this be in light of the way they are describing this thing, assuming it's real, assuming it's authentic. Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the video. Pulling it up right now. Should be able to see it now. Here we go. All right. So the first entity that this individual speaks of here are the jesters. Evidently, these are pretty common. They're tricksters, beings that deceive and trick whenever they're having a DMT experience. So that's what he's going to talk about here. So let's first watch it, and then I'll comment on it.
One user of DMT described their experience with a jester entity as follows. I suddenly found myself in this surreal and bizarre world that felt like a carnival. There were these jester entities everywhere, and they seemed to be laughing and mocking me. They were playing all kinds of tricks on me, like making me feel as if I was falling or twisting my perception of time. It was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Another user described encountering a jester entity that seemed to be testing their perception of reality. I saw this jester entity appear in front of me, and it seemed to be playing with my mind. It kept showing me different realities and dimensions, and it was like it was trying to break down my understanding of what is real and what is not. It was a very intense experience, but it also felt like a powerful lesson. Overall,
All right, so you kind of get the gist of this one. Now he has more. I'm not going to play the whole video, but I'm just going to kind of give you a few clips here and there so that you kind of get an idea. And obviously the underlying theme here is, trickery, deception, So there's an element of intimidation, there are threats, obviously again tricks. To me, this is reminiscent of some things that we see in the kingdom of darkness, according to scripture. That is the group of fallen angels who have rebelled against God and are waging war against him, also known as demons. You can see this mentioned, for instance, this theme concerning Satan and demons. In Ephesians 6:11, it says this: put on the full armor of God so that you can fight against the devil's evil tricks, as one translation puts it. Evil tricks. There's a lot of deception that takes place with Satan and demons. Trickery. I've spoken to exorcists, and they have said that, one of the things they have to do is they have to determine what the name of the demon is to be much more potent in their prayers of casting the demon out. So one thing that they will do is they will attempt to discern what is their name. And in one case, the exorcist told me that a very common name that he gets from demons during exorcisms is games, trickery, deception. So this theme here of jesters, deception, trickery, being threatening doesn't sound like a good being. It doesn't sound very promising. It sounds pretty negative. And in light of what we know according to scripture, it doesn't sound good. Also, I'll point out the kingdom of darkness also has false prophets that engage in trickery. You see this with Matthew 24:24. It speaks of false prophets offering false signs, wonders, tricks. You even see that with the Pharaoh's magicians in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament, where they're also engaging in trickery. They cannot perform actual miracles, but they can make it look like they're performing a miracle. And so again, this theme of deception, if this is real, if this is authentic, doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like it's the right team here. So yeah, not too impressed so far. All right. Well, number 2 is beings of light. Let me skip here to the 2-minute and 20-second mark. And he's going to talk about these beings of light that people encounter during these experiences. Here we go.
Encounter them. One user of DMT described their experience with an entity of light as follows. I was suddenly surrounded by this incredible radiant light that filled me with a sense of love and compassion. It was like the light was alive and communicating with me, telling me that everything was going to be okay and that I was loved unconditionally. It was an incredibly peaceful and transformative experience. Another user described encountering a group of entities of light that seemed to be communicating a message of unity. I saw these beings of light appear in front of me, and they seemed to be holding hands and forming a circle around me. They communicated with me telepathically, and I felt like they were telling me that we are all one, and that love and compassion are the keys to understanding our place in the universe. It was a truly humbling and profound experience.
Okay, so this one sounds a little better, right? I mean, love, compassion, peace, those all sound wonderful, right? However, unfortunately, these are sometimes things that can also be brought about from the kingdom of darkness in a temporary sense, a false peace, a false sense of love. I can recall some saints who have testified to how um, they will receive various apparitions. And in order to discern whether the apparition is from God or from Satan, um, they have certain ways of determining, is this an abiding sense of peace that they have? Or do they only have a sense of peace when they're in the presence of this being? But when they're then removed from the presence of that being, that feeling and sense of peace is gone, and then an absence of peace. In the case of the latter, they know it's therefore not God, but an abiding sense of peace seems to be something that would be brought about from a true messenger of God. Um, so this is also curious because beings of light, this is actually something that we see according to Scripture. That Satan comes as. If you look at 2 Corinthians 11:14, it says, quote, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light, end quote. So what Satan does is he tries to appear in many cases as something good, as something wonderful, as something promising, something hopeful, as a being of light, an angel of light. In some cases, he doesn't just show his true form. He comes in this deceptive way to lure a person for whatever his evil intentions are. So when I hear this concept of being of light, I have to say, well, could be good, could be bad. It could be either. But when I hear the message that's brought about from this, okay, well, we have a message of peace, love, unity. But in reality, those things are ultimately brought about through a relationship with Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the second person of the Holy Trinity. And I don't hear in any of these DMT experiences, maybe they're out there, but I've listened to quite a few, and I don't hear of any experiences where these entities are telling people about the truth about the Son of God, the truths that we find in Scripture, in the Bible. So to me, it already sounds suspect because the message that they're promoting, though it may sound good, it doesn't seem to be the true message. And then on top of it, we have to remember, well, Satan can come as a being of light. So just because he comes as a being of light, or just because he comes in a good form and preaches a good message, doesn't necessarily mean that there's no corruption hidden within this. It's if you hand somebody a glass of water and just put one little tiny drop of poison in it, you might not realize that it has poison in it because it's like 99.9% water, but then that 0.01% is poison, but it might be enough to kill you, even though you don't see it because it looks like it's water, and the vast majority of it is water. That is often how Satan interacts with individuals. He'll put forth something good, but he'll insert that drop of poison within the message as well. So I'm highly skeptical here when I hear of beings of light, especially. Now, this one is a little bit more explicit. It's on the nose, actually. This next one is demons. Yes. Oddly enough, some of the entities that people encounter during DMT trips are demons, right? And again, some might say, well, look, all this is just, it's just from people's psychological experiences. They might have a religious background or something like that. It's all purely psychological. And so, of course, they're going to see demons and things like that because those are things that they already know about psychologically. That may or may not be true. That could be true. But then again, we're in this video, we're exploring hypothetically, but if it's the case that they're actually experiencing real entities and it's not just purely psychological, sure, it involves their psychology, right? But in their mind, I should say. But is it purely psychological? Well, some are going to say no. And I'm just simply saying, well, hypothetically, if it's not purely psychological, if it is real, if these entities are real, then what might they be? Well, if you're encountering demonic like beings, I don't know, it might be a demon. Okay. But let's listen to this description here.
One user of DMT described their experience with a demon as follows. I saw this terrifying entity that seemed to be made out of pure darkness and hate. It communicated with me through a series of terrifying images and messages that made me feel completely worthless and powerless. It was like it was feeding off of my fear and anxiety, and I couldn't escape its grasp. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. Another user described encountering a demon that seemed to be related to their own psychological issues and fears. I saw this demonic entity that seemed to be a manifestation of my own deepest fears and anxieties. It was like it was telling me that I was a worthless, insignificant being, and that I would never be able to overcome my own limitations. It was a terrifying experience, but I realized that I needed to face my own demons and work through my own psychological issues if I wanted to move forward in life.
All right. So that's the way this person is interpreting this encounter with demonic beings. This person interprets it as they're encountering their own fears and they have to overcome it. Well, again, maybe that's all they're encountering is just simply a product of their own mind, their own fears. Possible. But if it is real, if it is a real entity and they're encountering something that seems demonic, it could be demonic. Now, what I noticed here, a common theme in this one was fear and hatred. It's curious that we talk about fear here, though, because there is another scripture that comes to mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. It says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." God doesn't bring about this fear. In fact, in cases where he sends a messenger, i.e. an angel, people are often afraid at first, but the first message of the angel is, be not afraid. And they give them a sense of peace. So God is not the one who gives us a spirit of fear, especially in hatred. That is not God. God is love, and he doesn't bring about fear. Now we could speak about the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but now we're kind of equivocating on the term fear there. That type of fear is more respect, rather than I'm somehow afraid of this one who has bad intentions for me or something like that. Well, that's not God. God's intentions are always good towards you. You might turn away from God, but God's intentions are always good towards you. So this message of fear and an experience of fear, if this is authentic, if this is a real entity, again, not sounding good. Doesn't sound like something that comes from God, but rather sounds like something else. Now, here's another one. The next entity that they describe is angels. Angels. Now, angels, as you know, is what actually demons used to be. In fact, they're fallen angels. They're still in the category of angels, that is demons. They're just simply fallen in nature. But some people in their DMT experiences say that they encounter angelic-like beings during their DMT trip. And so, okay, let's hear about it.
Described their experience with an angel as follows. I saw this incredibly beautiful angelic being that seemed to radiate love and light. It communicated with me through a feeling of peace and comfort, and I knew that everything was going to be okay. It was like it was telling me that I was loved and that there was a greater purpose to my life. It was an incredibly spiritual experience, and I felt more connected to the universe than ever before. Another user described encountering a group of angels that seemed to be related to their own spiritual journey. I saw these angels that seemed to be guiding me on my spiritual journey. They showed me scenes from my past and present and helped me understand the meaning and purpose behind my experiences. It was like they were telling me that everything happens for a reason and that I had a greater purpose in life. It was an incredibly comforting experience, and I felt like I was surrounded by love and light.
All right. So one concerning thing about this is that if it were a real angel, it doesn't necessarily seem fitting, because the person who is taking DMT is bringing themselves to a point where they're not sober in mind. Rather, they're using psychedelic drugs that, in fact, distorts at that moment their mind. Now, they're going to experience it differently and say, no, I feel that I think more clearly then than ever. Certainly, we can have that debate, but it would seem to me that this is a lack of sobriety whenever one engages in psychedelics. And if that is the case, given that scripture tells us, be sober minded at all times, it seems odd that God would send an angel of light and a true messenger from him to people who are trying to encounter and have interactions um, that would actually violate God's will. It just seems odd. Now, is it possible? Of course, it's possible. God could still send in a true angel, a messenger to them. We give them a message, even though they got there in the wrong way. God could still do that. Of course, absolutely. There's even cases where that actually happened in Scripture. But it also doesn't necessarily mean that it is an angel just because one experiences it as one. Because again, as we've seen, Satan can show himself and present himself as an angel of light. Again, 2 Corinthians 11:14. No wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. And number two, Ezekiel 28:14, which is about the king at the time. I think it was the king of Tyre, if I recall correctly. It's speaking about the king, but then it starts to shift into a conversation that really doesn't seem to be descriptive of the king. It just seems like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's a sudden shift in the text, and many have interpreted it as something that God is addressing to Satan before Satan fell, when he was, in fact, an angel before his fall. And so Ezekiel 28:14 says, quote, "You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones." There's different kinds of angels, but it seems, if this is, again, in the context of speaking to Satan, again, many people have interpreted it that way traditionally, then it would seem that Satan was a cherub. That was the classification of angel that he belongs to. And so, again, if you have Satan, who is an angel, and in fact, a third of the angels rebelled with him, according to the book of Revelation, then you have a whole bunch of fallen angels who can present themselves as beings of light or good angels, when in fact they're anything but. So I'm very skeptical here as well. Now, the next one is also very much on the nose. So 1320, the 1320-minute mark. The next being that we're going to encounter during this experience of a DMT trip, according to someone else, is snake beings, serpent beings. It's an interesting theme. All right, here we go.
One user of DMT described their experience with snake entities as follows. "I saw these serpents that seemed to represent the power of transformation. They were slithering around me, and I could feel their energy wrapping around me and penetrating my being. It was like they were helping me shed my old skin and release old patterns and beliefs that were holding me back. It was a powerful experience, and I felt like I was being reborn into a new version of myself." Another user described encountering a group of snake entities that seemed to be related to their own spiritual journey. "I saw these snakes that seemed to be guarding a gateway or portal to another realm. They had an intense energy and were almost intimidating. But I felt drawn to them. As I approached them, they seemed to test me, almost like they were challenging me to face my fears and overcome my limitations. It was like they were guiding me towards a higher spiritual state. And I felt like I had to earn my way through the portal."
All right. Thus far, the serpent beings. Well, I say this one's on the nose because it's just a very interesting thing to experience, given that one of the descriptions of Satan in Scripture is the ancient serpent. If you look at Revelation 22, it says this: he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. Now, of course, this goes back to the story that we find in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, where Satan presents himself in the form of a serpent. So when we hear of serpent beings, I mean, that just sounds odd, especially given the nature of the entities that we've seen so far. It just doesn't sound promising that we're now starting to encounter this theme in light of everything else that we've seen so far. So I don't know. So far, we've seen, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entities so far, and so I would say up to this point, 5 out of 5 all sound pretty suspect to me. The next one, kind of also on the nose. The 15-23 minute mark. Our next encounter is with dark beings. Yes, dark beings. We had angels of light, or beings of light. We had demons. We had angels. And now we have dark beings. Okay. So let's hear more about them.
One user of DMT described their experience with dark entities as feeling like they were being stalked. I felt like these dark beings were stalking me and trying to get inside my mind. They were always just out of sight, but I could feel their presence and their negative energy. It was like they were trying to break me down and take control of me. It was a really scary experience, and I felt like I was being pursued by something that I couldn't escape. Another user described encountering a group of dark entities that seemed to be related to their own negative thought patterns. These dark entities were almost like shadows that seemed to be following me and feeding off of my fear and anxiety. It was like they were trying to keep me trapped in negative thought patterns, and I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. But as I faced them...
All right, so one thing that we're seeing here is captivity in addition to darkness. Well, a couple of scriptures come to mind. Number one is 2 Timothy 2:26. It says, "And that they will come to their senses and escape from the trap of the devil, who has taken them captive to do his will." What the devil does is he takes people into bondage and captivity. That's also what sin does. It makes us captive in bondage. What does Christ do? He frees us from bondage to Satan and sin. He frees us from those things. However, Satan brings people into captivity and enslaves them. So these beings that are trying to trap and enslave and bring someone captive doesn't sound good. Moreover, Matthew 22:13 says this about hell. "Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" One of the ways that hell is described is outer darkness, according to Jesus. Jesus is the one who spoke the most about hell, by the way, in the New Testament. And here he speaks of it as a place of outer darkness. And yet we have these dark beings. Doesn't sound promising. I don't know about you. Last one here. Let's go to the 17-minute mark here. Unidentifiable beings. So they're basically unclassified. All right, let's take a look at these.
I saw these beings that were almost like abstract shapes and colors with no real discernible features. They seemed to be constantly shifting and changing, and I couldn't really get a sense of what they were or what they wanted. It was like they were existing on a different plane of existence that I couldn't fully comprehend. Another user described encountering a group of undefined beings that seemed to be communicating through telepathy. I felt like I was in the presence of these beings that were communicating with me through some kind of telepathy. They didn't have a specific form or appearance, but I could feel their presence and their energy. It was like they were trying to convey a message to me, but I couldn't fully grasp what it was. Overall, the descriptions of undefined beings encountered during DMT experiences suggest that these entities are associated with a sense of mystery and incomprehensibility. They may communicate messages that are difficult to fully understand, or may exist on a different plane of reality that is beyond human comprehension. Depending on the individual's interpretation, they may be seen as enigmatic and intriguing, or as confusing and overwhelming. The use
All right. So again, the theme here is confusion, disorder, a lack of form, can't get a fix on it. By the way, some people will often say that they have these just profound experiences during DMT. They just learn all the mysteries of the universe, but then when they come back to their body, they don't remember any of it. And it's interesting because we have in the chat Kyle Whittington, who says, one of my favorite stories about a dude tripping was that he figured it all out while he was high. But when he sobered up, he lost it. So next time he wrote it down so he could keep it. When he came to, all he had written down was pineapples. Right. So, but ultimately here we have a being and a message of disorder and confusion. Again, can't get a fix on it. Well, there is a scripture that comes to mind here, 1 Corinthians 14:33. For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the congregations of the Lord's people. So God is not going to bring disorder, chaos, a lack of form. Rather, he's the one who brings form. In fact, if you look at the book of Genesis, when you have disorder and chaos in the world, God brings form to it and order to it. Right there, the very beginning of the book of Genesis. So far, 7 out of 7 doesn't sound good. Now, I don't know if any of this is real. It could just purely be a product of one's mind. One thing that makes me suspect that it might be a product of one's mind is, again, Terence McKenna describing these elves, mechanical elves, and then all of a sudden everybody starts having those experiences during DMT trips of these mechanical elves. Well, it's like, okay. Then once you put it out there, once you verbalize it, that's now a product of your mind, and maybe that's just what's coming out during DMT. Or maybe it's a combination of both, a product of one's mind, but then there also are some other entities. So there's multiple possibilities here. It could be all entirely a product of one's mind. That's possible. It could be a mix of one's mind, just products of their mind, such as the elves, and also other entities that are real. Or it could be entirely other entities and not a product of one's mind. Even though they're experiencing it through their mind, it's not a product of their mind. It's something foreign. It's another entity. And those are real entities, and people are just somehow communicating to them through this experience. I don't know enough to know for sure one way or the other. I don't think anybody knows enough to know one way or the other for sure, even if you've had these experiences, because again, for some people, it's really real that they have a person talking to them, and yet it turns out that they're hallucinating and they have a psychological disorder and there's no real person there, but for them, it's really real. And so just because you feel it's real doesn't necessarily make it so. So just because you say, well, I've experienced it, that doesn't really settle it. So one way or the other, it doesn't mean it's not authentic, but also doesn't mean that it is authentic. But hypothetically, if this were true, well, since these are some of the beings that people commonly experience, when I listen to the way they're described, it just doesn't sound good. It just doesn't sound like something that God would send, especially if Christianity is true, which I believe we have way more evidence to believe Christianity is true than to believe that the messages people and the experiences people have during DMT are true and authentic. So I remain very skeptical here. But if they are authentic, I don't know. It does sound kind of demonic in nature in a lot of these instances. So my 2 cents. Anyways, hope y'all enjoy this. If so, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this on your social media, and also check me out, patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to support me. God bless. Behold these shocking images. Pope Francis coughing and even sneezing.
top-notch theological research made by a philosopher on his personal blog shows that there can be a temporary and even partial suspense in the teaching authority of the Catholic Church. Now, when the Pope coughs or even sneezes, he isn't teaching in that very moment. So the next time you see the Pope sneeze, remember there's a partial suspense in the main organ of the Magisterium of the Catholic Church, and this is a big deal.
Are you tired and confused by people peddling all kinds of wild perspectives about the Catholic Magisterium, and you want a more balanced and informed perspective? If so, check out my course, Understanding the Catholic Magisterium, at maximusinstitute.com. God bless.
Is it possible that ancient aliens created other ancient aliens? Ancient alien theorists say yes. But then, is it also possible that ancient aliens created the ancient alien theorists? And are the ancient aliens and ancient alien theorists led by the Vatican, headed by the Pope? Ancient alien theorists and certain unnamed Catholic YouTubers say yes.
Tired of Catholic shows that peddle conspiracy theories that sound like something out of an Ancient Aliens episode? Check out Reason and Theology for a more reasonable take. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. See you next time. God bless.